Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am coming to you live from the Underworld North studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined across the continent, not in Canada, as we discovered, by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Oh, how you doing? A bit of an inside joke.
Oh, good. If you're wondering why every time you see me on the screen it's getting darker, it's because we had daylight savings time, so
Yes.
it's dark.
Yeah, we
It's
had it
it's
too.
it's 5:30 and the sky's all dark. Night sky, pitch
Yeah,
black. I
yeah,
hate
it
it.
was it's ridiculous.
It's
Arizona and
ridiculous.
Saskatchewan, the only places in this on this continent that have it right. Storytelling, fantasy, world building, continuity, Twitter discourse. The House of Mouse, more Twitter discourse, all that stuff. What does it mean to claim that Star Wars is franchise fiction? We step back with another what is Star Wars discussion. Sure to go in deep. Before we do that, though, let's get the plugs out of the way. That's that up there. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Ion Canon Pod. Don't follow us on Threads. We don't use Threads. The only time I use Threads is when I see something fun to respond to. I mean, you can follow us on Threads if you want, but there's nothing there. Twitter, especially Twitter, I'm gonna get back into that. Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got super chats, we got memberships, we got all that fun stuff. Of course, in the comment boxes below, feel free to let us know what you think about anything we're talking about. If you have questions about what we are talking about, going on about. See, I'm Canadian, telling you. It's a fact. Yeah, let us know, and we'll get to it. But if you give us a super chat, we'll guarantee to get to it. Last bit of plug here. Oh, well, I'll get to the Discord in a second, but first of all, Tractor Beam Comics reviews every Thursday, 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Grab your lunch or grab your breakfast. Chris Abbott and I talking about comics. This coming up this week is going to be, hopefully we'll fit everything in. Talking about 4 High Republic stories this week.
Not doing Vader or
We are doing Vader, but
okay.
also 4 High Republic stories.
Okay.
Somehow
Vader versus Palpatine, round 355.
like that. Yeah, I haven't read those lists yet for that, so I'm not too worried. But yeah, I guess that's coming down the pipe. Yeah, he's gonna confront him again. That makes sense.
It's what the Sith do.
But yeah, so we're talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about Shadow of Starlight #1 that I finally read, Shadow of Starlight #2 that I will have read, High Republic #1, and the Jocelyn Picka story in Insider 222, I believe. So 4 High Republic stories, phase 3 begins. Get to that in a little bit. But yeah, so join us on Thursday, 12:15 Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific for all that fun discussion. Joel, let us know about the Discord. How's that going?
Discord's going great. We had a lot of fun last week with another one of our little get-togethers. And this week we're going to be having a game night playing some Fortnite. So that'll be fun because they brought back the original map. So all fun.
And there are Star Wars skins and stuff happening. I see things about events in Fortnite.
There's Ahsoka. You can play as, you get an Ahsoka skin and play as her. So
okay, I thought I saw an ad or something for, I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining things. I'm getting old. I'm imagining things. Who knows? Fair enough. All right. So yeah, check us out there. Also, the link below should be minty fresh. So yeah, join us there. Just chatting. Introduce yourself. Chat. Another way to get the episode here on YouTube, the YouTube stream. Yeah. It's just and chat and ask us questions. We're in there. We don't bite. We're friendly. So you let us know. Yeah, if you're inclined to join the Discord server, the Underworld Discord server. There we go. All right. This week in Star Wars, you want to continue on from last week's discussion, it looks like.
Yes. So last week we kind of did a little what is the Old Republic? And I during the conversation I realized, why is it that we've done this weird thing where it's like the past technically has 2 republics? Like, why is that? I never actually understood like the behind the scenes reason. Well, after doing some after show research, because I do that
Sure.
I probably shouldn't, but I do that anyway.
Yeah,
Always,
why not?
always looking. I found the behind the scenes of the Rusan Reformation, which is the thing in Legends that creates the Republic we see from the prequels. Um, Thanks to our good friends at the Wikipedia, I'm going to read the behind the scenes snippet right now.
Yes, they do the forces work. Wikipedia.
They really. The Rusan Reformation was introduced in the timeline in order to explain several differences between the Old Republic as presented in the comics and the ones which appeared in the prequel trilogy.
Mhm.
In Legends, the Republic is established to be in existence for about 25,000 years, based on Obi-Wan's line in New Hope that the Jedi have been the guardians of peace and justice of the Old Republic for 1,000 generations. For a long time, legend sources were the only work set during the Republic era, most notably popular Tales of the Jedi saga. However, in Attack of the Clones, Palpatine mentions that Republic has stood for 1,000 years. This is, at first, seen to conflict with C canon, wider history than G canon.
Mhm.
C canon being comics, G canon being George. In the films, in G canon, the difference between the Old Republic and the Galactic Republic was addressed in the second season of the TV show Star Wars The Clone Wars, making a reference to a fallen Old Republic, in which the Jedi Order was also present, predating the Republic of the prequel era. Prior to that, in the expanded universe, the Rusan Reformation, in which the Republic is reorganized, following the already established defeat of the Sith 1,000 years prior to the films at the Seventh Battle of Rusan, was invented by subsequent writers to give an expansion on Palpatine's line, thus bringing all these sources into relative harmony through a retcon. It also explains, in the context of the expanded universe, sealed Bibbles could claim in Attack of the Clones that there had not been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic. Palpatine's statement that the Republic has stood for 1,000 years might have been hyperbole. In other words, the equivalent of saying the Republic has stood
Hyperbole.
forever
Sure.
and was not meant to be taken literally.
Yes.
Given Palpatine's nature as a politician prone to making grandiose statements and generalizations, given great weight to this argument. Seal Bibble's remark could also be taken the same way. He may not have considered the earlier wars as full scale, or alternatively, could have put politically revision to the official Republic history, such as there are in real life. That could have led to a majority public opinion that there had been no early wars, when in fact there had been. So yeah, all that nice little history and lore that all we talk about
Yeah.
because of a retcon.
It's from a certain point of view. Things would be true from a certain point of view. Yeah, it could be hyperbole. It could be hyperbolic. It could be I mean, it could be the case. I mean, definitely High Republic is trying to well, I'll back up and say, that's uh why there's still a version of this sort of shadowy in canon because that has to be the case with Attack of the Clones being canon. Believe it or not.
Authors just took words literally, is I think the issue.
Yeah, there's that too, but yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense historically too. I think just to have these structures in place for only 1,000 years, and that's still an incredibly long time by our standards. But of course, the galaxy is a lot bigger, so I think time could be slow. Institutionally, time could be slower too. I can see. I mean, it just fits. I don't know. It makes sense that this is the thing. But then, of course, why it is still canon is because it's based on Attack of the Clones, and so it's based on what we get from G canon, which is still just now it's still canon. So, and also, I mean, Clone Wars. I mean, I didn't quite catch that line in Clone Wars. I should look that up.
I actually found it and then I
Yeah.
lost it
Okay.
today.
We'll need Ben
streaming going
to
on, but
remind us where this is in Clone Wars.
I'm sure I
Yeah,
could find it later.
yeah,
I want to say it's like the Citadel arc or something. It's said by like
yeah,
I don't remember who said it. Dang.
yeah.
Oh
Which
well.
is also around the time, I guess, when these books and comics were being written.
Oh no,
Yeah,
actually,
or
the
later.
Tales of the Jedi was the '90s, so they were operating.
No, I mean like the Rusan and the 1,000 Year.
Oh yeah.
Thing.
That was the Darth Bane trilogy. That was I
Okay.
want to say 2006.
Right, yeah, the Darth Bane trilogy, of course, yeah.
Yep, 2006.
So, and then of course Clone Wars 2008, 2009, around there. Yeah, I mean, okay, that's fair.
Also, I found the link to when it was said that line.
There we go.
So
Yeah.
that's for later.
I'll
For later.
try to
But
look
yes,
into that. So yeah,
I just find stuff like I always find stuff like this is interesting. It's like, okay, in the '90s when we just had A New Hope, it's like, okay, 1,000 generations. A generation is 25 years, according to at least the writers.
mhm.
So by that math, the Republic and the Jedi have been around for 25,000 years.
Yeah,
And then Attack of
clearly.
the Clones comes, and then they're like, oh well, I guess Palpatine said 1,000 years, so we're down 24,000. So okay, how do we square this circle? And then they decide to square the circle that way, I guess.
I mean, one of the things we're going to get to in the main topic is how real world things affect it. I mean, that's what partly what a franchise means, right? Is how real world, yeah, like that kind of real thing that happens. The franchise, there's a new film in the franchise that changes some of this backstory, and we'll get to paper canon more on the paper screen relationship a bit later on. But yeah, I it's interesting. It is interesting. It is an interesting little tidbit, and again, makes sense. Kind of why I mean the Disney changeover really changed a lot of storytelling choices, but more dramatically. But yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing to think about overall, and maybe this for a good whole episode is the impact of the prequels on the expanded universe, and the impact of the prequels on on the as retcons, as opening up new avenues. There you go. There's your assignment for in a few weeks from now is to do another
Oh
survey.
yeah, God
There you go.
yes. I think
Yeah, yeah.
that's just fact. Yeah, that is
But
very
like
true.
looking at the different ways. Yeah, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
there's a good episode idea on the spot. You guys are seeing this on the spot, seeing it happen
Wonder if we
as it
get a,
happens.
wonder if I should get a guest for that one. We'll think
Yeah,
about it. But yeah.
yeah. See who's around. Yeah. So is that your? Do you have anything more to say about that one? Or
Nope, I just wanted to kind of give that one
yeah,
because, like, I wish I knew that when we were doing our discussion. Get like, oh, that would have been fun to talk about a
yeah,
little bit. But yeah,
yeah. Fun times. Speaking of going back couple couple of centuries. It is funny how when they announced the High Republic, it's 150 years, and they take it literally 150 years. So 32, 282, whatever and literally whatever it is. Going back 150 years, or no, 200 years. Sorry, 32, 232, 382. Anyway, all that to say is I finally finished phase 2 of High Republic. I finished Tales of Light and Life, and then I finished phase 2 and then finished Tales of Light and Life, and now I'm finally caught up on everything as implied by talking
no,
about Tractor Beam. Until Wednesday when all the new comics come out. But yeah, phase 2 really loved just about everything. Not everything, but just about everything. Um, and especially again, I can't say enough about Marta Rowe and how she just the heart behind her and the conflict within her, going from this very flowery, innocent girl who takes care of kids and has this crush on this Padawan, to the guide of the open hand, the guide of the closed fist. That's a bit of a spoiler, but yeah, this this 18-year-old in her Tales of Light and Life story, this 18-year-old boss lady who still has this heart and this beating heart. Again, it still makes me wonder what's the key to defeating the Nile. Is it through vinegar? Is it through honey? I don't know. And that's the thing with phase 3. Shadow of Starlight #1, one of my favorite comics I've read in a while. It's going to be relevant for next week, and I'll talk about why, just in terms of the relationship with the Jedi, and it goes into the Jedi between the fall of Starlight and the beginning of phase 3, and all these things that have implications a couple centuries down the line. And really fascinating to see again how they've built things back. Sorry. Yeah, they kind of to your point, Joel, you say they're gonna have to reverse the whole general retreat, and it's to see they already have, and that's interesting to see that there are still efforts to confront the Nile. It isn't completely just this abandonment of the Outer Rim wholesale, but the habit is built, and the the idea is built. And it's kind of, was it you were talking about this, or one of us were talking about, maybe it was with you or somebody, or maybe it was with Chris. No, it was probably with you, about how they're preparing for the last war. and
Yeah.
preparing for the last war leads them to the Jedi leads them to fail in the next war, and the next war turns out to be the greatest conflict in the galactic history. It turns
What?
out to be one of, like, but that's the thing. It's why
Hmm.
there's a whole animated series about it. Why there's
Yeah.
two films bookending it, that are pivotal for the Skywalker saga, is
Right.
because the Clone Wars are the greatest, and so they get caught up in that, and it ends up being their great downfall.
I mean,
And so,
I actually want to just give a shout out. It's actually well, I want to give a shout out to my buddy Red Leader, who on the
yeah,
podcast when we're doing Kill the Jedi, he was at his point of every
mm,
time the Jedi take a black or take a swing, or in some cases actually get almost extinct. Every time they come back, it's like
yeah,
they reform. It's like they're more
yeah.
prepared for what killed them the last time. It's just that they
It's
don't always.
interesting thinking about this now. Um, so I when the one semester I was in those United States, I took a course on. I mean, I was taking political science. I was taking
Mhm.
some American foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy, and how that's basically how. I mean, that's how governments, presidents, leaders develop a policy framework, is by responding to the last thing. I mean, so the Marshall Plan developed based on two things, based on the need, well, based on the fusion of capitalism and democracy, right? And how you had the Nazis and you had the Soviets, and you had to confront both, and that's what you knew in the moment. And so that's just an example. I mean, got to talk about, you could say, the Obama doctrine, trying to have a bit more coalition, a bit more, global consensus, but still trying to preserve American supremacy and exceptionalism in the world. That, yeah,
Not making
that,
any moral choice observations, by the way. We're just saying the facts. Like, yeah, people prepare
yeah.
for the
I'm
last
just
war.
saying,
People
I mean,
prepare.
we could say Obama didn't go. I would say Obama never went far enough, but in terms of trying to actually reconstitute the global consensus, but to say, I mean, there's reasons for that. My point being, kind of more objective political science point. Leaders can only prepare for the last war effectively, and that's why one of the reasons why history keeps getting into quagmires and getting into problems, is because all we know is what came before. And so this is what the best practices are. This is what looks good to the voters, what the voters expect. And I don't think, not that Jedi have voters, but as we see, during the thing with Order 66, they had popular opinion, they lost it. And so uh it's amazing to see, that the luminous authors have brought this up and saying this was the last war, the last great threat maybe that they faced. And so that, how it conditioned, this is what I'm getting at. It conditioned the response to retreat. It conditioned the response, even in Shadow of the Starlight, #1. We see a moment that's very reminiscent of John Jackson Miller's novel coming up, Living Force. There's a moment where I'll spell one moment here. Um, the Jedi Council is saying, "Let the Republic deal with the Nihil. Our concern is the Force." As if you can make this distinction between what's happening on the ground and what's happening in the Force cosmically, and that's a problem. And where does that come from? What if that comes from, to some extent, the threat of the Nameless, and the threat of uh, no longer being able to be guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy? They go back and they uh, start to say, okay, what can we do? I guess we can just contemplate mysteries of the Force. This is overwhelming. Yeah, it'll be all that to say. I mean, I know we're in store for some surprises. I hope we are. I'm sure we are.
Hmm.
But also, I mean, that's another thing about High Republic, is the things we've been able to predict have also been interesting. The things about the latest streaming show, which I hope we can talk about soon one day, and I'll get to the strike in a second. Um, the things we predict were also satisfying. So we'll see.
Oh, so two things.
Yeah,
One, if the strike's not over by the time the next streaming show comes out, then something fundamentally has broken in our Hollywood system.
yeah,
But that's a whole other thing. As for I also think it's kind of I think this is also just kind of the simplest. I think this is something a lot of people need to be more sympathetic towards the Jedi for. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, they fought the Sith 1,000 years ago, and then they all went poof, vanished, secretly
Yeah.
rule of two. The last war they prepared for was one with the Sith. By the time the
Mm.
Clone Wars, now if you want to include canon material, the last war they fought was with this Nile.
Yeah.
So they're not really ready for the Sith, who have been secretly hiding for 1,000 years,
Mhm.
kind of doing their thing, or maybe not even doing anything at all. Like when they strike, it's like, oh shoot, we're not ready for the Sith. The
Yeah.
last people we fought were these weird pirate bikers people. We're not. He's like, but the Sith, like, oh shit,
Yeah.
shoot.
It's not even just not ready. I think it's, and this is why Palpatine knows it's time, is they're predisposed, they're predetermined, or not predetermined, predisposed to hiding behind the Republic. Literally and figuratively. They're predisposed to saying, "Oh, there's a war on. All right, well, let's go." The Republic's at war, which means we're at war. Let's hide behind this grand army by standing out in front of it, and then getting shot down by it. And so yeah, it's unprepared, but also the pup is primed. I mean, just I was watching Star Wars Explained, his theory about the Guardian protocols, which is what comes up um, in Shadows #1, and talking about how uh, a lot of those things either reactivated by the time of the Clone Wars or just had never left, and Palpatine knew exactly how Alex was saying Palpatine knew exactly how the Jedi would react because they have these set rules in place that have by the time Markians on center stage here have proven effective at keeping them safe. And so it's definitely we're definitely starting to see the connections even clearer. They were always there between the High Republic and the prequels. I think, yeah. I mean, I've always looked for them. I've always wanted to see them, so I saw them. But I think we're seeing them even more so now. Again, not necessarily absolutely 1-to-1, whatnot, but yeah. Um, phase 2 in the books. Phase 3, yeah, it has begun, and I'm excited. It's High Republic. It's my favorite thing in Star Wars. I'm excited. There we go.
Yay!
Fun
Very
times.
curious.
Before we dive in, eyes on screen. One last thing, you know, there was supposedly going to be something last week.
No one
They
said
were,
there was, which is
no, I know, and there's always pundits saying this, that, and the other. I was telling you about how the actors wanted 10%, and the studios were going to give them 8%, so they're going to compromise on 9%. I'm exaggerating the numbers there, but yeah, it almost seemed like it was going to happen, and then it didn't. And I'm really I'm starting to think they're definitely playing this tactic of, let's give them some sense that this is going to be over and then pull it back to make them more exhausted and desperate. And it's so slimy.
Oh, I
The
mean, that's its
series, yeah.
negotiations. So it's just
It
gonna
is.
be all slimy and hyperbole until eventually it's like, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
Like,
Slimy, but
till
like emotional tactics, which again, it is what it is. But yeah, well, that's
our
the thing. Like, if this doesn't, like, at what point does this require deeper changes and deeper structural rethinking about how the industry works? I mean, maybe it already does, but I mean, I'm not an expert in these things, but I just think, like, yeah, like you said, what are we doing if we can't actually get anything in place by even by February or March?
Well, that
uh,
was the doom scenario, and it seems like, at least from what everyone said, that might not be happening. So at least hope not. So if
yeah,
it's like January is like the doom scenario. So it's like sometime in November. Hopefully that's still
yeah,
in the ballpark. And like I said, if we're still doing this by when I think the next streaming show would be, which I still predicted sometime in August. That's just me.
yeah,
That something is fundamentally broken and something has happened that is horrible, and like what the heck has happened to the world. But
yeah.
it's
Well,
like
August seems extreme, but you
I
never.
know
I mean,
that.
that's the thing. You never know. I mean,
uh,
like Bob Iger, he still has a job. He still has work to do. You know, I'll admit this right now. I already have tickets for the next Marvel movie.
Oh,
You
I'm
know,
seeing it. I'm seeing
you
it.
know,
I'm seeing it.
I'm gonna go see those. He has other things. People are still gonna go to Disneyland. You know, people are still gonna do this and the other. There are other things. I mean, it's just they'll be doing everything but making shows and movies, or
And
they'll
speaking of the
get
Disney,
so good.
I was gonna say, speaking of the Disneyland thing, it's like,
Yeah,
everyone's all like, is losing their money on its movies. It's like they don't make money from their movie; they make it from their theme parks. So
yeah.
it's a,
I mean, they still. I mean, Infinity War and Endgame made lots of money.
true, but that's not like where the bulk of Disney's money comes from. They're a
Okay,
real
is that
estate.
true? That they make most of it from
Oh yeah,
theme park?
they're a
Okay,
real estate business before they're like a movie business,
that's true.
really.
That's true. I mean, that was Walt's dream, right? In a way.
Something
Yeah,
like that. I mean, that's how they
yeah.
survived all these years through the land and the theme parks.
So, like, what's the incentive for the studios to actually do what they can do, what they did with the writers, and give the actors what they want,
Ah,
what they need? I mean, what's the incentive? I hope there is some incentive. Um, I mean, that's another weird thing. Is I was talking to Dom about this just about an hour ago. Um, you know the it's weird. What was the strategic thinking behind giving the writers everything they wanted and then holding out for the actors, like to say this is what's possible but we're not going to do it. It seemed like it was an odd tactic. I don't know, but again, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm just thinking
it's
out loud.
basically just who blinks first, who gets exhausted first. That's pretty much it.
Yeah,
Who
so
who gets tired enough, and it's like,
we're all tired of this nonsense.
aren't we all to a certain extent?
I
Aren't
want
we?
I want to talk about this Space Wizard show, but we can't. Yeah, it is what it
Well,
is.
hopefully before Thanksgiving. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, before American Thanksgiving.
Yeah, before
Canadian
American
Thanksgiving
thing.
already happened. American Thanksgiving. I mean,
Oh yeah,
we were hoping before Canadian Thanksgiving, but no, that didn't happen. So yeah, maybe yeah. When American Thanksgiving, that's in a few weeks, right? Yeah, you said that's in
16th.
16 days. Is
Yes,
it the 16th or 16 days? It's like 23rd or something, right?
I think it's the 16th of November. So yeah, so it's getting close.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Enough of that nonsense. By nonsense, I mean actors
The
get a good deal.
studios. Yeah,
Studios do
actually
the
do.
right thing.
Yes.
On that note, yeah, franchise fiction. Here's another Iron Canon. What is Star Wars deep dive? How it relates to the real world? How it relates to an actor
Mhm.
strike? How it relates to George deciding to make new films? Whole bunch of stuff. You got lots of ideas there. I'll let you take it away. Go ahead. What is franchise?
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie
Mel
is made.
Brooks making a
Star
Star
Wars, the
Wars.
T-shirt. Star Wars, the coloring book. Star Wars, the breakfast cereal. Star Wars, the lunchbox.
Star
Star
Wars, the
Wars, the
soccer scarf.
flamethrower. And of course, Star Wars, the
Flamethrower.
doll. Baby Grogu. Mando.
Flamethrower.
I don't know. That was one of the jokes. It was like, yeah, that's like just the extent of merchandising. The flamethrower.
I mean, there was that almost real lightsaber.
I mean, that's the beauty. That's what merchandising is all
Yeah.
about. Just put Star Wars on anything and call it a day.
Star Wars,
For
the soccer scarf. There it is.
that's hey, it's gonna happen one day. Star Wars, the hockey league. Like,
You never know. Yeah.
all right, so let's kind of get into this because Star Wars is interesting. Star Wars is
I hope so.
interesting.
Our
Um,
one current viewer hopefully thinks it's interesting too. Anyway, sorry,
yeah,
go
yeah, I hope
ahead.
so.
Two viewers. Two viewers. Sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, okay. So I'm gonna take a lot from a movie reviewer I like called the Movie Bob, who
Mhm.
gone over this little thing of his in one of his in the podcast he did with his brother, where he points out a good thing, a interesting point of Star Wars has this like weird, interesting place in Boomer, Gen X, older millennial history of
Mhm.
not starting out as essentially a glorified commercial for the franchise it was a part of for like a week and a half.
Right.
Talking about New Hope or the
Yeah.
original 77
Well,
Star
people
Wars.
still insist on calling Star Wars, not A New Hope, but Star Wars, and it's the first one, not the fourth one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Star Wars 77. And like it was
yeah,
the original, the film that came out for this little indie project that could and then did and exploded. Um,
mhm,
and then kind of that's when it starts. That's when Star Wars kind of it's like didn't start out as just a glorified commercial for a
yeah,
day. But not for a day, like a couple weeks to the box office, and then it's like, okay, well now we can merchandise and franchise this thing out. Like we can start
yeah,
making the books and the toys and the Kenner action star and Kenner action figures. It's like they had toys. Star Wars had toys from day one. It's just
mm,
like no one really expected them to be anything because indie projects had toys, but it's like no one really cared,
mm,
and then everyone started to
something.
care, and then they get all those.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and because of that, you have especially among that crowd of people who I mentioned, the boomers, the Gen
mm,
Xers, and the older millennials, um,
mhm.
who kind of feel like
Sorry.
that this should be more, and that there's like the conflict between Star Wars, the franchise, and like Star Wars, the like thoughtful artistic thing with a narrative. It's kind of like the dual back and forth, and how much of that actually exists in the current franchise DNA. So when
Mhm,
they do see things that feel toyetic or like this is just a commercial for the wider franchise, they all get really weird about it and yada yada. Compared to say Marvel or DC, where they're always trying to sell you comic books and action figures, even at their best, when the movies can elevate these things to more. Even the best Marvel film, like say the Black Panther, still
yeah.
is a commercial in some expense to Black Panther. It's like Black Panther. They want
Like
you to
the comic
sell.
book, you mean?
Yes, they want you to
Yeah,
sell you Black Panther toys and comics, even though it has lines of like the Killmonger say like bury me in the ocean with the body of my ancestors who were brought in the ships.
yeah,
So, but I don't. But people are kind of deep
mm,
down always know that these things are still, in essence, part of the wider corporate business franchise thing. While with
mhm,
Star Wars, there's always kind of this weird sense of like identity crisis between thoughtful, artsy
mm,
comes from a weird eccentric creator, aka Mr. George Lucas, and then of course a bunch of Canon action figures and everything kind of
mm,
being somewhat an adaptation more of the Kenner action figures, um, which we'll get into later. I'll try to clarify that later.
mhm,
So I think th- that's sort of the weird thing about Star Wars is, yeah, it starts out and is the eccentric creative thing, but it's also, especially on the movie side, kind of also in some cases glorified commercials to sell the toys, the action figures, the comics, the books, and everything else.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
and that's basically any franchise fiction, really. Which like it all kind of works to fit in the brand. Even the best thing, like the latest Spider-Man video game, which is really good, you should go play it. It's still
mhm.
trying to sell you more Spider-Man at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of franchise fiction in a nutshell, and sort of like I mean, it's like kind of still there to make money as its primary goal,
Hmm.
even when it's really good and can be thought provoking and artsy. Essentially,
Yeah. I mean, this gets back to what we're talking about with Bob Iger versus the actors. You know, uh,
how
whose primary the issue is that different people have different primary goals, right? Um, you know, Kathleen Kennedy, well, not Kathleen, Bob Iger has one primary goal. Ryan Johnson has a different primary goal, a very different primary goal. Kathleen Kennedy has to navigate between the two of them, and uh, and she's done a stellar job in what, in some ways, is an impossible situation. Uh, you know, Bob Iger and telling her, "Oh, Marvel's making 2 films a year. You got to start making 2 films a year. Let's push out Solo in May." And it's not that great, and so it's fine, it's good, but it doesn't make that much money. So clearly, the answer is just to axe whatever it is that we're doing. Um, yeah, because Bob Iger, and part of the this is the deeper issue in our society, is that the financial incentive is the thing that has the most power. And maybe what we're getting at more deeply is the tension between capitalism and artistry. And the thing is, they don't always oppose each other, right? Good art can sell. I
Oh
think.
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing with Star Wars. That's the thing when Star Wars is at its best. It's the first blockbuster. A New Hope was the first blockbuster.
I think
You know,
Jaws came out beforehand, but yeah,
yeah, I know, but well, Jaws was getting there, but
the first
the
modern
first,
blockbuster.
the first film to really take over in that way,
Mhm.
and the thing is, no one would say, well, I mean, people might say it, but then I guess they don't get it. Would say that isn't a deep, meaningful film with a deep, meaningful story. Here, I wonder if it gets at kind of what I've said about Star Wars at its best is it's and versus say what I say is the J.J. Abrams issue to some extent. Star Wars at its best is a meaningful adult grown up story packaged as a kid's story. It's
I mean, I don't
it's
think
your
J.J. Abrams had a problem. I think it is a kid's
or
story
where I might say for him it's a kid's story packaged as a kid's story, right?
because it is a kid's story. It's not an
Yeah, and
adult story.
so
I think,
and I'm being too harsh on J.J. Abrams, but
well, it
right,
is
but
a
I guess
kid's.
that's the thing is with Force Awakens, we can say it succeeded exactly what it meant to do by here's the word rebooting the franchise and by giving more mojo back to the franchise. It was a blockbuster that blockbusted,
Yeah.
um, and it's not that isn't a meaningful story. It isn't a rich story. It's just you know uh I guess compared to Last Jedi, and here's the thing: Last Jedi is the other extreme. It's all meaning, all rich, and divided the fan base. And people, I mean, I'm sure, I think it did make plenty at the box office, but it caused a lot of animosity and might have lost Disney a bunch of money too. And so,
Oh, I mean, I
it's a
don't think that. I think
okay,
that's
maybe, but
just
at least
all.
the bad PR of all the haters coming out and saying, uh, you know, saying it ruined their conception of Luke Skywalker, not my Luke, all that stuff. Whereas, George, when it comes to Jar Jar, for example, he wasn't as sensitive to that stuff. He was,
Oh no, he was
he.
very sensitive to that.
But what I mean is, no, but he didn't let that. I mean,
He
yeah,
did.
he
That's
took out the
Attack of the
Jar
Clones.
Jar thing. But here's the thing.
Mhm,
I think here's my thought experiment.
mhm.
Phantom Menace comes out, but Bob Iger is the one calling the shots in 1999. Does Bob Iger finish the prequel trilogy? Does he water it down? Does he go to all these themes about militarism and power and
I mean, that's Attack of
start
the Clones. Attack of the Clones is the watered down prequel trilogy.
but
It
I don't
is.
think it is. I don't think it is. No, I
I
think
do.
it's still I know you do. I think it's still a grown-up story masquerading as a kid's story and packaged as a kid's
See,
story.
I don't like that because I feel like you're taking away from kids, and like at the end of the day, that's who Star Wars is for. Us adults really should not be having
Okay,
any say in
maybe
it.
let me qualify then. It's
If
able
anything, I
to do
think that's
both at the same time. At its
no, because if anything, I think that's the problem with the prequel and why so many people hated it because they didn't realize this is a kid's story. It's a kid's fairy tale, and too many people treat it like an adult story,
but it
especially those
has
Gen
deeper
Xers.
themes and deeper ideas that kids can't fully grasp on first viewing, but that they can maybe intuitively. And so I'm saying it's just not all fun. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Andor. Andor is not a kid's story,
I mean, yeah,
and it does
that
great, and it's great. It does it's so well. It's true Star Wars, but I think I'm talking about accessibility. I'm talking about
oh
you
yeah,
know
but I
yeah,
mean, but here's sort of my thing.
yeah,
For me, most Star Wars is
mhm,
A New Hope, Return of the Jedi, Force Awakens,
yeah,
Mandalorian. Some Star Wars wants to be a little bit more than that. Say
yeah,
Empire, Last Jedi, especially.
yeah.
I'm gonna put Andor.
I'd say
Um,
Revenge of the Sith.
well, and then that's certainly. I mean, depending
Yeah,
on where you stand on that. I
yeah.
mean, some people just say, Star Wars has been good cinema 3 times, and those people
Okay.
would normally say A New Hope, Empire, and Last Jedi. At least Last Jedi always gets sort of the.
Interesting. They don't say Return of the Jedi.
No, they kind of feel like that's sort of the start. I know some people would say that would be where the start of Star
Interesting.
Wars kind of becoming more of that franchisey fiction kind of
Okay.
really kicks in. I kind of
Yeah.
see it. It means like we're doing the Death Star again. I know there were some
Cute furry
choices.
animals, you know.
I know there's one. I know General Nadine had to put on a beard because his toy had
Yeah.
a beard.
Sorry, they're
Um,
not animals. Ewoks are people. My bad.
yeah, I'm sure someone in Lucasfilm marketing saw the Ewoks and like, hello. I mean, that's why they made the Ewok cartoon in the '80s.
Yeah.
And
So,
2 Ewok spin-off movies, um,
hmm,
that were made for television. Um,
yeah.
but that is sort of the thing I've always sort of said about that sort of the identity crisis of Star Wars that goes
Right.
back really to George himself, where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he set out to make an indie film, it exploded, and then he himself began the process of, okay, this is a franchise. We have the books, we have
Yeah.
comics, we have toys, we got video games.
Yeah. Yeah. Bless
um,
you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And even when he made the prequels, I'm sure,
Mhm.
as much as he had those deep themes and whatnot, he's also like, you know what? That make a good toy. That make a good door. Someone at marketing's like,
Oh
or
yeah.
those decisions, or like there'll be action decisions like, hey, let's really show off this thing because we're gonna make Legos of this thing, and people are gonna buy them.
Yeah.
Um, Although there is actually on the record, yeah, George did pivot quite a lot because of how Phantom Menace happened.
Sure. Yeah.
That's why do you think Jango Fett's in there? Does you really need a Boba Fett to really like? Jango Fett is the epitome
But they,
of
they
kind.
made a great story out of him though. That's the thing. It was like an
Yeah, but
interesting
it's still
story.
fan service. It's
Yeah.
still that's the decision to make,
Sure.
a bunch of Boba Fetts. And also I've heard stories of like they were gonna do more Mortisy like stuff in the
Interesting.
prequels, but then they pulled back on that because no one liked Nickelodeons. Yeah, I mean George
Yeah.
compromised on those films. Really, that's historically accurate.
Yeah.
That's why Attack of the Clones is not his favorite movie. Um,
I guess what I mean though is he compromised on some of those details, but he didn't shy away from the deeper themes and deeper ideas. And that's the thing is like I mean things that were controversial. I mean, giving the Trade Federation that much power, saying, here's Nixon, here's Bush going into
I
Iraq,
mean,
right?
I think that's though. I think you can't blame Bob Iger though. I think you just have to say, well, you know what? Not everyone's got those weird quirks about George. About only George Lucas has those themes and ideas
I
in his
just
head.
I just wonder if
Mhm.
I mean I could be wrong. I mean that's the thing. Bob Iger let
Bob
Last
Iger
Jedi
doesn't make
happen.
these movies.
He let Last Jedi happen, so I could be wrong. I think there is something about George's independence that was able to hold the tension. Um, well, and, maybe I'm not being fair. Maybe I'm being too either or here. I think what we're getting at is this tension between fun, accessible action adventure stuff that cool designs that look great, and I love them, and sell action figures and toys, and I do that too. I buy those too. Versus you know challenging, compelling stories that even for younger audiences challenge kids to grow up. you know,
Oh
um,
yeah,
the tension
mean,
things that may not sell necessarily as much, and it's Star Wars, so will. But I mean, yeah, it's the constant challenge, right? I mean, I think later on in the notes you have this problem of the auteur, the film auteur, and um, what am I getting? The
where would you
again
take notes on
the
Star
yeah
Wars?
the difficult, not difficult, but the what am I trying to say? Yeah, challenging, deeper stories versus maybe more palatable, easier stories that are easier to swallow.
I
Uh,
mean, I'll be honest. I think in terms of that, the
yeah,
prequels are kind of all over the place for me personally in terms of
that's
like
possible
finding
too.
that balance between the two.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, because like yeah, you got Senate scenes, and then you have
Mhm.
the epic pod racer, and I want to play that pod racing video game because that sounds
So I
awesome.
think what I'm saying is, I mean, maybe whether the extent to which you like the prequels is the extent to which you believe that they hold those two extremes together.
Oh yeah. I
You
think
know,
that's
that
certainly
maybe that's ultimately what I'm saying. Um, the extent to which you love Star Wars, and maybe dive into it, and your life is invested in it, I think is the extent to which you appreciate the way those two are held together, right?
right. I like to
You know, it's
me, if I like to put on my to try to look at things from like the non Star Wars fan kind of
yeah.
uber critical person, I would say like the ones that fall more on the thematic non I call it toyetic, I call it toy Star Wars, action figure Star Wars.
Yeah, I've
The
heard
ones
that
that
phrase
fall
before.
like on the not that side, the not
Mhm,
that side, um, would be to the probably a less extent, but still probably still greater extent, Empire Strikes Back,
mhm,
Last Jedi,
yeah,
and Andor.
yeah.
Those 3 to me are, like, the most they don't feel like they were made with, like, a toy idea in mind, which is funny because I do think Last Jedi could actually have some great toys and some great designs with, like,
Yes,
those
yeah,
Praetorian
I mean,
guards. I
Griffin,
want that.
yeah.
I want that design. But that definitely
Mhm,
feels the most thematic.
mhm,
Um, but in terms of, like, the scenes and stuff, at that point, I think that's just a question, and this was, like, a really interesting article from 1138 of, like, what is
mhm,
Star Wars without George Lucas? And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, I think that's just all Lucas. I think those themes, eccentricities, I think that's Lucas, and I think,
mhm,
with Star Wars now, it's just Star Wars is just now a setting and kind of morphs into the form of whoever writes it. Be it book author
true.
like Tim Zahn, who does that kind of sci-fi thing, or John Favreau, who's always a lot more action packed. So I actually don't think Bob Iger has very little influence on like what
No,
theme
that's
Star
true.
Wars deals with at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, because
Maybe I'm not being fair to Bob either, I don't know, but
I think that
yeah,
if you want to or
mhm,
critique or put blame or just say, hey, just put the critique on. Well, I'm sure maybe Iger has some influence on this. I don't know, but at the
mhm,
end of the day, it's Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy's the president, so the buck stops with her in terms of who do they hire for
right.
making these things in the first place.
I mean,
Um,
maybe that's another thing with I don't again, we don't know Lord and Miller, what happened there. Maybe they were too far on one extreme, you know? Maybe Gareth Edwards was too far, no, I don't know. Um,
I've heard like mixed things about Edwards'
yeah,
actual ability to tell good story,
yeah,
even though his visuals are really good. Um,
yeah,
as for Lord and Miller, everything I heard is Kasdan wrote one movie. Lord Miller did not really like the script, so when
mhm,
they decided, we're gonna kind of not go by the script as much, make a totally different kind of film, despite what the script says.
yeah,
Kasdan's like, "Hey, you're not shooting my script." Candy obviously friends with Lawrence
yeah,
Kasdan because of course she is. She's like, "Hey, you're
mhm,
not following the script and the tone of the script. You're out of here. Get Ron Howard. He's gonna follow more the script." That's how you get sold.
yeah.
So
I mean, that's another question is how well can Kasdan hold those things together? And
I mean,
what
that's certain.
directions which direction does he go to? Now, that being said, I mean, it's not saying it's wrong to have a fun toyetic story. I'm just saying that's only part of what I mean, at least for me. Like, maybe this is me being an older millennial. I don't know. I do want more out of my Star Wars than simply a fun action story. But
I mean, that's the
yeah,
thing. I think so a lot of that really does come from George, and I think once George is gone, you lose a
yeah,
lot of that, quite frankly.
like the fun action story or the
Oh, the deeper
uh
meaning stuff, because I think
yeah.
only George really finds midi-chlorians and esoteric.
No, but I mean, Ryan was able to do it.
I know, but
That's the
not
thing.
everyone's Ryan Johnson either, to be
Nevins,
fair.
Ryan Johnson. I mean, but that's where Dave Filoni maybe pops in, right? But that's also where Charles Soule pops in. That's also where Claudia Gray comes in, you know, and Kevin Scott. So they're doing it. That's what you're gonna keep saying. That the High Republic is bringing it all together in that way, um, having these these Padawans with these crushes and going on adventures with buckets of blood, but even in those stories, even in Daniel Jose older stories are goofy, silly, have these silly beats, but deeply meaningful human moments. Having, teenagers having crushes can be deeply meaningful human stories about growing up and maturing and handling emotions in a healthy way. Yeah. Tell me that story too. That's fine. I mean, that's the thing with High Republic, oddly enough, is the most compelling, interesting stories are with these younger characters who you'd think they'd resort back to just fun action adventure. They have fun action adventure. This is my point: is they have fun action adventure, and they grow as characters through it, and that is what at the core of what Star Wars has always been, is with these younger characters learning the deeper meaning of life, and it involves fun, and fun is required. I'm not, I'm not being a Debbie Downer here or whatever. I mean, we're talking about this
Weirdly
movie
though, when
franchise.
most
I go
people
to cons.
critique weirdly though, when people critique this
Yeah,
stuff, it's actually has nothing to do with, like, deep themes or meaning. Some of that is there, but
yeah,
most of the time, it's like the stuff that the critics really like is, like, when things get, like, new and it's, like, new
mm,
stories not connected to the Skywalkers, and
yeah,
then, you know, and then it's sort of like when I was watching a whole video about, like, Mando season 2 reaction, and it's sort of like, when, Bobo shows up and Luke Skywalker shows up, it's like, "Oh, dang, this is a Star Wars." It's like, "Well, what
yeah.
did you expect? This is a Star
I'll be
Wars.
honest.
What do you want?"
That's kind of how when Luke shows up at the end of season 2. That's kind of how I felt.
In the movie Bob's perspective, it's like, "Well, what did you expect? What your order? Why are you complaining Ronald McDonald showed up when you ordered a Happy Meal?" That was his line. I love it.
That is a great line.
That is a
Who
great
said
line.
that one? Whose line
Yeah,
is that?
his name is Movie Bob. He's like,
That's funny.
"No, Bob, why are you complaining that Ronald McDonald showed up? You know you ordered a Happy Meal." Um,
Fair.
and
Guilty as
that, I mean, in
charged.
terms of like what the Mandalorian really is, it is the Star Wars show. In a weird way,
Yeah,
like Rebels is the Star Wars show. Like when Rebels came, it's like, yeah, that's
yeah,
very much the Star Wars show, right? It's like, yeah, it's got new characters, but it's also like, and here's Tarkin, and then here's Vader, and then here's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and here's
yeah,
Darth Maul. And there's Palpatine at the end. So,
yeah.
it's like it's
And then
got
Luke running again.
in the background. Yeah, he's like,
Yeah, yeah,
like it's got the Star Wars things
yeah.
there. And as far
I
as
mean,
I'm
I'm a big fan of fan service too. I mean, like the Space Wizard show.
Mhm.
I mean, my favorite episode in that. you
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah. And that is
all of
fan
our favorite
service.
episode in
That
that.
is
Again,
that's
so
fan
good.
service. Like that is as much fan service as Luke showing up at the end of. And you could question
Yeah,
the execution and stuff and the artistics for sure. We can. But
right.
again, it's sort of like the common question of, you ordered the Happy Meal, to some extent.
I okay. I'll just say this though. I'm sure you can go on YouTube and be like, Happy Meal, but gourmet it up. I mean, that to me is what he does at its best. And yeah, okay, Luke in the Mandalorian, yeah, he
I
does
mean, I
that.
wouldn't say gourmet. I would say like high end fast food, or at least high end franchise
So
restaurant.
it's Shake Shack. It's not McDonald's. It's Shake Shack, guys.
Yeah,
I
okay,
love
Shake
Shake
Shack.
Shack. I've had Shake Shack 4 times in my life
Oh
in
wow,
a four-day span when I was in New York.
we
It
got a
was all
Shake Shack
fantastic.
actually nearby. I've never been. I hope to give it a
Really,
visit.
in LA, I thought that was just an Eastern thing.
Oh, we got one. We got. I
In
think there's a
California,
Shake Shack in like this little local mall, and it's not
okay,
LA, Orange County, but yeah.
whatever. It's all LA to me. Don't come for me, guys. Anyway, um, fighting words. Orange County,
Fighting.
SoCal.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sorry. Anyways, yeah. Anyway, keep going.
But ooh, hang on, I gotta do something. But yeah, but at the same time, I'm trying to just think here, or like, I'm gonna go back to the notes, and just kind of think of like
Yeah, I
lost my
just
train of thought.
where,
But
where are we
kind of,
here?
we're all over the place. But
Yeah.
I mean, to look at kind of the shows in a weird way,
Mhm.
I do think they're all kind of in this different balance, weirdly enough. And at some point,
Yeah.
it's like, do you just kind of accept it and kind of just go for it? It's like even he was talking about the Book of Boba Fett show, the movie Bob. 'Cause this is where I'm going to get a lot of my reference from because he kind of brought up a lot of the
Yeah.
points of like Book of Boba Fett and Kenobi are kind of interesting because it's like, okay, one Book of Boba Fett, and this is how he describes like Book of Boba Fett. Not about much, mostly just a show to get Boba Fett to cool two things, but Boba Fett's on the Rancor. It's cool. Shut up, it's cool.
Yeah.
While Kenobi is a bit more, hey, Kenobi is not 100% artistry either. It's like it's got two
No.
big fan servicey moments with Vader and Kenobi having a fight. It's thankfully not, egregious, I would think, and he brought that up too. So like it's like
Mhm.
20-30% kind of those big fan servicey moments of the Vader Kenobi duel. And then like 70% new doing different things with the character kind of a situation. So, it's sort of
Yeah.
like in all these shows kind of have this was before Andor. So it's like when he was looking at Andor, it's like, okay, here's the guy from Andor from Rogue One, but also we're doing a bit more of a different tone. So that's cool.
Mhm.
Um, and also I guess it gets to kind of my point of a critique is fine, but at what point are we just do we have to kind of take the show or movie on its own terms?
Hmm.
Right? I think there is some time again, it's like
Yeah.
you complain about I know, use the hacking reference. It's like, you know, uh, they made a Happy Meal even though you want gourmet, but it's like, uh, or it's like complaining you ordered a Happy Meal and then saying this isn't gourmet, even though you just ordered the Happy Meal.
Yeah.
So just kind of that question of, especially with so much of this at this point, it's like
Mhm.
kind of learning to take the thing on its own terms. So it's like, it's like if you don't like it, that's fine, but but it's sort of like, just move on. Or it's like, you know what? Some people are gonna like more the Book of Boba Fett type story of just it's fun, Boba Fett doing some cool stuff. Some people really do like Andor. I mean, I myself am one of the people like, yeah,
Yeah.
I really like Andor. It's like, yeah, I like kind of, but it's sort of like, and then this gets into my big complaint about like then why isn't everything like this? And it's well, this is because this is a franchise, and you got to do at least something different a little bit each time to kind
Yeah.
of get the keep the thing fresh. Um, and if you like Lucas's Star Wars, you got 1 through 6 and a sixth season of television. There it is. You
Yeah.
know, I think this is also just a bigger problem, and we talked a lot about this a lot with the George Lucas stuff of like you're never gonna recapture the love you had for Star Wars with Lucas because Lucas is gone. Oh, even Ryan John. I'm not saying you can't do deep themes, but just like
Mhm.
Ryan Johnson's deep themes and Tony Gilroy's deep themes, and even Dave Filoni's themes. Well, Filoni's a little bit different, but I'm going to Ryan and Tony.
Yeah.
Uh, their interests are deep, but they're in different places for
Yeah.
sure.
They're different
Um,
people.
and then of course there's just the general whole thing of like, well, we're not 10 anymore. We're 30-year-old. We're not
True.
gonna enjoy Star Wars as much as we have when we were kids. I mean, I'm sure you're enjoying the High Republic as much as you did when you enjoyed it as a kid. But you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
give it another 30 years. I don't know if you'll enjoy another book series as much as you did at the High Republic. So it's like you can't capture the magic more than once.
I mean,
Uh,
that's probably why. I mean, it's probably why I want more than just the fun action adventure is because yeah, I acknowledging people's love for that, people's fixation on that. Hey, it's got to be all this all the time, and that's my bigger concern is what is this? Why is Luke on this rock brooding, trying to end the Jedi when what I remember of him is him swinging out his laser sword and kicking tar and taking names. I mean, and you don't disagree with that part. I
oh no,
will
no, no,
say
no.
um about what I'm saying there, but what I will say is, you bring up episode 7, you bring up Force Awakens, and I'm more forgiving of that one because of what it had to do in the moment. And Din's talked about this. You've talked about this. A lot of people have of saying, yeah, what I was saying before. It had to bring back that initial joy of A New Hope, and and just kickstart the franchise again, and bring everyone back in. And it did that well by following patterns that we know, but also, it did add some new things. I'll give it that.
There was go.
Especially
Yeah.
Ray, Finn, and Poe are new characters, are different characters. Also, there's always archetypes. There's always going to be familiar characters, like in High Republic. There's always the
Oh
archetypes.
yeah.
Chris Abbott and I were talking with our Phase 2 recap. Always the archetypes. I'm more willing to do that. I'm more willing to say, okay, episode 7 was more successful than episode 9, and I thought Rise of Skywalker, I thought was cool. I thought it was fun. Thought it had some interesting ideas, interesting lore ideas, but it could have gone deeper. It could have,
Rise of
could have,
Skywalker has a whole host of problems. So
yeah, and
let's.
that to me is exemplifies the issue of trying too hard to be a franchise and not getting at the core of what Star Wars is. You know what I mean?
Well, I
And
think that's also kind of another problem is no one does agree what Star Wars is.
true. I mean that there's these two kind of competing visions of it based on like you're getting at, based on our childhood nostalgia. Maybe I have this weird advantage in that, for me, the nostalgia hit wasn't anything Star Wars. It was this bald guy with an English accent from France. You know, uh, and a series that ends at a poker table. That's the nostalgia hit for me. And then I came back to Star Wars a little later in life, so that's part of it. But
I
yeah,
mean, yeah,
sorry,
okay.
good. Yeah,
Oh no,
I'm
no,
I'm done. I don't know.
no,
What
no. I
else
was
can
gonna
you?
say yeah, but everyone's kind of got a different thing about what Star Wars is.
Yeah,
Like I was on the forums during we talked about Ahsoka and
yeah.
kind of stuff like that. It's like everyone,
Space Wizard show.
every okay, wait for the show. Everyone kind of every director, writer has kind of taken their own
Mhm.
view of what Star Wars is. Abrams, yeah, he is more the action kind of dressing kind of
Yeah,
director. Ryan kind of looks at more the deeper thematics, deconstructing it even, which is
yeah,
powerful stuff. Ron Howard and Kasdan, I think, Kasdan in particular probably took more what he preferred from Star Wars with his own. He was there, so he's like, what did I like about Star Wars when making it when making episode, 5 and 6, and Ron
mhm,
Howard probably just translated that onto film.
yeah,
And Favreau is a little bit keeping it simple, kind of, he's kind of bit more action packed, but also, kind of, simple. Here's a story of the lone wolf and cub, and
yeah,
then kind of Dave is like this weird George clone, but he's clearly also got EU fan stuff because he's very much
yeah.
that kind. He was very
Way
he
more
was
than
an EU
George
kid.
ever was.
Oh yeah, Dave is definitely an EU kid or
Mhm.
teen of the '90s for sure, certain. And then that's just I think I always tell people, if you're going in expecting Lucas's Star Wars, you're gonna get disappointed every time because there
Yeah.
is only one George Lucas. Even like if Filoni is closest to like, well, what would George do? And even he's a little not always gonna do 100% for sure.
Mhm,
So there's that. It's not even just saying, oh, don't expect deep themes. I'm just
mhm.
saying everyone's interested in the same thing, and
Yeah,
especially in terms of just filmmaking style.
yeah.
Not everyone believes
So,
it's faster, more intense.
so I guess this raises the question. Getting back to the main topic here, then, does Star Wars as a franchise, does it depend on and its integrity as a franchise, its kind of cohesion? And I don't mean uniformity, but I do mean cohesion and coherence. Does it depend on it pertaining to George Lucas Star Wars? And maybe this is getting at what we were saying before about what we said in previous episodes about, does it have to pertain to his themes about the initial impetus of young people stepping out into a larger world? Does it have to pertain to that? Does it have to be toyetic? Does it have to talk about economics and power and politics and whatnot? Does it have to? And in this I might contend yes. This is the one thing I'll say yes, I think it does. Does it have to pertain to the importance of choosing the common good and choosing to the well-being of others, and that choosing the well-being of others also brings your own well-being as well? That's the one thing I will say all Star Wars has to ultimately say, because it's a right point. It's true, and that's even what the light side of the force is about. um Ultimately, you can say it in different ways, in so many different ways. Andrew was going to say it in a completely different way than Daniel Jose Older's High Republic Adventures comic, right? Um, now there might be something, I don't know if there's going to be some kind of coherence,
So
but you know what I'm getting
yeah,
at is, do you see? I mean, where the question comes in is, what holds the franchise together is what I'm getting at.
Well,
What would you say?
yes and no. I mean, I would never want like fascism good, Emperor Palpatine's the best. Be selfish. Um, Clearly, those are
Yeah.
some immoral. There's some immoral stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing about Star Wars is,
Mm.
the thing about Star Wars is, especially without George's eccentricities, kind of keeping it together.
Mhm.
I don't know if there is anything keeping it together, quite frankly. And that's I don't want to. I
Mm.
didn't put this in the notes, but this is reminding me a lot of that last 1138 article, who goes on about what is Star Wars, why we
Yeah.
all arguing about it, kind of a situation. I don't know if Star Wars really has, as a grander franchise, a central kind of thematic
Mm.
compared to Star Trek, which, what is Star Trek?
Yeah.
Star Trek. It is about the future. It shows an anti-capitalist society. Hence why,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, better representation even. It's like, okay, we're humans. We're doing better.
Mhm.
Star Wars can pick up and put down, as in the articles,
Interesting.
pick up and put down those real world issues that is convenient. If you want one author to be like, I want to really do like a deep dive into like how pollution can really screw up the nature. I can do that. If I just want to tell a cool action story with like some basic
Mm.
ideas, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Um, so in a weird sense, in terms of like, I mean, again, as this article points out, Star Wars is a mirror. It
Mhm.
is the reflection of whoever really is writing it. In
Yeah.
terms of a central cohesive thing,
Interesting.
outside of story group, kind of just making sure, hey, don't contradict this too badly. Um, it is kind of hard to really see what the central point of Star Wars is, really, outside of George Lucas's own eccentricities.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, then it raises the question because you bring up the other Star franchise, right? And for a while there, it was really getting away from what made Star Trek Star Trek. It was really getting away from this thing of um, people have come to a place where they understand cooperation, collaboration, putting your heads together to solve a problem reasonably and maturely, uh, and with curiosity and wonder and exploring. I mean that's the thing. It was getting away from that, and now it's come back to it, and that's made it more successful. Now with Star Wars, you could say uh, it has that openness, that breadth. It has maybe a wider appeal. Is that the more successful option, or is it simply? I mean, guess yeah. It's a maybe that we're bringing. Maybe I'm bringing back the old fight that doesn't need to be brought back. But which franchise is going to be more successful? The one that does have a more consistent identity, um, versus the one that is had a more consistent identity. Star Trek has a more consistent identity.
I think Star Wars
So
Trek always had a more consistent identity,
it
quite
did, but
honestly.
I'm saying Enterprise and early Discovery started to lose that and went away from that to some extent. It came back with Discovery and now Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. I will say that, and Picard, of course, the nostalgia hit, right? Um, you know, is Star Wars going to continue to be successful even as it has this maybe broader appeal, a bit more of a buffet, right? Pick and choose which one you like. And is that going to have more mass appeal? Then there's this other franchise that's also under House of Mouse that's coming under a lot of criticism lately. Marvel for having well, I guess the issue with Marvel is that things always trying to have too much of a coherent, consistent, singular identity, and the people are tired of that and they want it to branch out even more. Um, are they going to
They
be
are.
accepting of it branching out even more? That's another question. With the next show that's coming out in January, you know, that's gonna break the identity a little bit. And then there's another
Well, I'll,
movie
I'll say
that
this
Taylor Swift
about.
is hopefully going to be in. That's
Ooh,
also going to not. I mean, break the identity. It's too harsh. This one get maybe the question is, uh, yeah, you get what my question here um, is this broader lack of singular franchise identity. I mean, first of all, is that true? To what extent is that true? To what extent is there still things that will be consistent? That even the story group and Kathleen Kennedy and them are saying you have to actually come in line with these values, even as you tell a different story with different archetypes and explore a different angle to those values. Or can you question the values? Can you? That's the Leslie Headland show. Is that going to question the values? And I mean, did Ryan Johnson do that? Did he question the values? Or no, I would say he didn't. I say he
I wouldn't say
came
that.
at them in a deeply profound way that we didn't expect, that felt like he was questioning them,
The thing,
but he didn't. And so he expanded it. And so that's the thing. Is there a center of gravity and everything continues to expand around it?
well, that's sort of that's an interesting question, isn't it? Is well, first I'll just say Last Jedi. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Ryan Johnson questioned the values. I think he deconstructed a lot of this tropey storytelling that
Yes.
Star Wars has always been used to.
And the
stuff
way
like,
we're used to addressing those values, right?
yeah, so I think that's a lot of where people kind of get weird about it, and don't understand what he's trying to do here.
Yeah.
Same with Andor. It's just
Yeah.
I think Andor very much taking those values and just showing them in a different light, in a different tonal way. It's still the fight of rebellion against the evil empire. Just we're actually going to show the empire is kind of brutal and terrible, and it's like we were talking this off screen where they're talking about Leia and A New Hope. It's like Leia gets tortured by the torture droid. She's fine when we see her in Luke's like she's like a little short for a stormtrooper. Bix gets tortured by the torture droid, and she's all punched over. It's like. So just that's more of a storytelling tonal thing than it is really just a thematic thing.
And maybe we struggle with the difference.
I think so for some reason.
Maybe that's part of it too.
But yeah, that is interesting because what I guess I guess it depends on what you want. Do you want a smorgasbord of Star Wars where it's like there is something for everyone? We're hopefully going to get films in the future that will kind of cater to different people in certain way. Not saying they can't be deep or anything. I'm just gonna say the Rey film is for people who really like the sequels. The Filoni film is for the Mando people, and then the mangled is the biblical epic.
That was for me. That was for me.
That was for you, and hopefully there'll be more.
But also, so is Filoni's show was for me.
Yeah, I'm not saying they all can't be for you. I'm just saying
because the prequels are also biblical epic, and that's the thing to my mind. But anyway, that's a whole other.
So I mean, whether or not there's a central theme running through all these films that I just mentioned or not, I don't know. But I do think there's a lot of different. These films are for different audiences. That's what kept Marvel. That's why Marvel has gone. People said, "Oh, Miss Marvel bombed because of Kenobi." It's like, well, okay, maybe the numbers in some cases aren't like it's the biggest thing ever, but it did get a lot of. But if you read the data says that it did hit with a group of people Marvel never really hit, which is younger people and Gen Zers. I mean, I really liked Miss Marvel too, so so and also I kind of think the whole Marvel's in trouble thing has always been overrated, but that's just me. Kind of getting on my soapbox.
I mean, you think the whole Star Wars is in trouble is overrated too. So I mean, we all think that.
Oh yeah.
We all think it's overrated. To be clear,
I'm sorry. If you think that the Star Wars franchise is like in trouble, we were both, and I was probably even more involved. Because you're more of a Trek guy at the time. I was more involved in Star Wars fandom in 2008, 2012, and that was a dying period. Was we're wrapping up here. Clone Wars was on, but like for the most part, Star Wars was very much kind of feels like it was in the final years of like, let's wrap up, people. We're closing down. People
I mean, that's because George was running out of steam.
Yeah. He getting up there.
And that's, I mean, that in a nutshell, more than is it more than anything? More than anything, maybe explains the Disney sale, which
and not the 2008 financial crisis and some other things.
But
But
like
yeah,
it needed a change. The franchise needed a change. Maybe the franchise needed to find a way to expand, even as a thing. But I mean, the thing about Star Trek, you know, Discovery and Strange New Worlds are very different shows.
oh yeah,
You know, and yet they still have a similar. I mean, they still have very clearly identifiable commonality about teamwork and about curiosity and adventure, and Lower Decks in its own way as well. So
I
yeah,
mean, well, I mean, you know, whether or not, I mean, I guess it kind of, I think question like this is,
yeah,
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, look at Space with the Show and Andor. Look at Mando. I
hmm
kind of see those as sort of. I mean, if I mean, I would love to like one day. I would love to do a deep dive. Like, is there commonality between these three shows or not? But even
yeah.
if they're not, I love all three of them.
So they're
I'm
set in
glad
the
they
same
all.
time, or except for Andor isn't. But
Yeah, but I love all three of them.
yeah,
They're very different. They all got different vibes. I mean,
yeah,
so does Strange New Worlds and Discovery. So the vibes are different. Whether or not
yeah,
there's any like thematic commonality between them, I don't really know. I mean, I have I don't want to talk about it too much.
yeah. We've definitely gone
Oh
into
yes,
Trek stuff, but but
to kind of go on to the notes here for a
yeah,
second. Again, you know, not only did Force Awakens, yeah, give the shot in the arm to the franchise. Um, I hope it doesn't sound too blunt or crass or anything, but after
mhm,
that, I remember seeing a lot of female women coming into the fandom and big
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And from little things I've always heard,
mhm,
Star Wars in terms of growing, yeah,
mhm,
it tapped out on on male boys like us, in terms of people coming in,
yeah,
and that Force Awakens definitely wanted to capture a lot of that Hunger Games audience at the time, which
mhm,
was very female centric.
yeah.
I want
Which is another reason why I'm way more forgiving of Force Awakens, right? Um, the
I
way it centered Ray, but and that Last Jedi continued that centers Ray in such a beautiful way, deeper way. That does Rise of Skywalker to the same extent, maybe not to the same extent, but does it enough? I mean, I'm not the expert in that, but yeah, definitely the way Force Awakens brought in a younger female audience and to see them represented on the screen. Yeah,
and we talk about Force Awakens. Let's just peel back the Force Awakens of it all and just say Episode 7, directed by generic director.
yeah,
I don't see any version of Force Awakens that's not somehow a somewhat back to the roots kind of vibe.
right. At
Maybe
least
different
a
executed.
successful
I
one,
don't. I don't know.
or
I maybe
unsuccessful.
different
Sorry.
vibe executed. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But like
Yeah,
look at Star Wars Rebels season 1.
yeah,
That was like first scene is Ezra looking up, seeing a Star Destroyer pass as the New Hope music plays.
yeah.
You don't get it, that was a
It's the
Mando
Star Wars show, as you said. Yeah,
Star Wars show.
yeah.
Um, but to kind of change course here because we talked about this for a while. I mean, I
Mm,
guess in terms of like the point of commonality between all of these things,
mhm,
I feel like we'd have to do a deeper dive. It's hard to say. I think
yeah,
also I'll just say this, and this is something I think again you brought up, which I think is a good point.
yeah,
We confuse theme with tone,
yeah.
and I think that is something that is always very, very annoying to talk about with Andor. Like, just because Andor is darker and has like someone actually getting tortured by a torture droid, like mentally messed up, it doesn't mean like it's changing the themes.
Mhm.
It's showing those themes a different light.
I mean, Andor is it's just a wonderful way by showing the darkness, it's showing the heroism of facing the light. I don't mean Luthen's speech. I don't know. I don't think Luthen's speech is actually the heroism. He thinks he's being a hero,
I don't
but
think he
really
thinks
it's
he's being a hero, but I definitely.
or whatever. He thinks he's doing the heroic thing by denying heroism, right? You know what I mean? By denying his own sense of heroic virtue. Andor is the one who does end up seeing how much the darkness and continuing to move towards the light. It's the Qui-Gon line from Master and Apprentice. Not because we win a cosmic game, but because it's the light. And that means and ends have something to do with each other. I mean, that's where Cassian's story ends up is he has He has Galen in his scope, and you know is able to take the pause, and he has his orders, take the
Oh,
shot, and he's able to say, he's able to have a moral crisis and say, what if choosing life in this moment is the right choice? And
right.
so it's able, and Tony Gilroy is able to think those things through and carry those things through, and I trust him too in season 2.
Oh yeah, but and also to kind of bring back the argument that doesn't need to be brought back, but I like to bring it anyway.
Sure.
I do wonder though if this is also something about Star Wars' appeal that maybe even Star Trek doesn't have, because with Trek,
Hmm.
you know, I mean, yes, Strange New Worlds and Picard and Discovery are totally different and whatnot,
Hmm.
but and I can't speak for these two completely, so forgive me. But
Yeah.
it's like they're all kind of similar. That it's about a crew, they're on space and they're exploring, and then they're
Yeah.
learning lessons. Um, so they got all that similarity. Same with well, Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine was like that's what made Deep Space Nine sort of the interesting
Yeah.
way about out. But look at Mandalorian, about a Mando and his kid going around the galaxy. Andor's a spy thriller.
Hmm.
Kenobi is about a Jedi, and I think there's something to be said of that'd be like if Star Wars was maybe more concise. I feel like well, then
Hmm.
all Star Wars would just be about the Jedi, because that was the
Yeah.
original New Hope. And like no, we're doing to have a game called Star Wars Outlaws, which is about smugglers.
Yeah.
Um, so I think in some ways Star Wars as of now, like you don't see. Although I do know they want to make like a Star Trek Academy thing, with Starfleet Academy show, which I hope they
Yeah.
do. But it's
I
like
mean,
there's no
well,
Klingon show, or there's
no.
no what is random person doing on this planet. It's just like because Star Wars kind of has that versatility to tell all those stories
Yeah. I
in a
will
weird way.
say the 4 shows in New Trek are all, they have their distinctions.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Like with Discovery, it's more driven by, it's more serialized and more driven by one big threat that they have to confront. Whereas Strange New Worlds, it was a different episode, different thing each show. Whereas Lower Decks, it's animated young people shenanigans, but also them. I mean, that's actually close in a way, closer to Star Wars in that sense of young people figuring out how to navigate, make their way in a galaxy. Yeah, I guess that's the question I brought up before. Is Star Trek has gone into this direction of having more a clearer consistency. Is it going to be successful because it has a clearer identity? Is Star Wars going to be successful because it has broader appeal? Is Marvel going to be able to navigate the two together? Is Star Wars going to be able to navigate the two? I mean, in different ways. Maybe that's what we're getting at. And that's why we inevitably went to other examples of other franchises,
Oh,
because the deeper thing with a franchise story period is one that has to navigate a consistent identity with the ability to tell different, new, exciting, interesting stories, interesting angles, interesting aspects of world building that are particular to that franchise, but also can be particular within the franchise, different pockets, different corners. Um,
what's
they all have they all struggle with, not struggle. They all have to navigate, set a course, chart a course through hyperspace.
what's
Um, with
interesting.
this thing, let me just finish the thought. Is Yeah, I mean, it's kind of summarizing what we're saying. They all have to navigate
Mhm.
uh, consistency and diversity, and so yeah, I mean, maybe that's the thing. Ultimately, the numbers might actually tell us one day, and the numbers obviously have, there's so many different things coming into that. Uh, what is going to happen with Star Wars fandom? Is it going to devolve into just these different pockets of different camps? And I know you're going to get into the fan bubble in a bit, but even you and I maybe different things we'll gravitate towards. Um, I will say one thing about High Republic, for example. Yeah, it's mainly a Jedi story, but it's not exclusively either. You have Afi and the vessel in them. I think they're going to go off and have this other angle of this adventure of the shipping guilds, and What happens with that history driven by this younger character who is taking matters into her own hands, and she's not a Jedi, and she's able to have this impact. Um, yeah, but that may be the exception that proves the rule, that there are so many Jedi in this in Hyrule. That's why I love it, because for me, that's the thing I want. May not be what everyone else wants, and so that's the question: is how much mutual conversation will we be able to have? How much draw will we be able to have? Will I go out and buy all the books, or I'm going to be more selective in what books I buy? Am I going to go
Already starting.
watch? Yeah, I mean, am I going to go watch all the shows multiple times, or am I going to be more selective of the shows I watch multiple times? And those Disney Plus are going to have those numbers. You know, I don't know.
Well, speaking of one franchise we didn't bring up, but I understand why we didn't, but it's sort of like it's one that I hope becomes successful because I think it's going to be very interesting, and that is DC Comics, because DC Comics is a unique franchise.
Like DC films on screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Although I can probably also to the comics too, because it's the same appeal. Kind of is that biggest reason it failed the first time. Because they tried to make it consistent. They tried to give it all to one person, Zack Snyder. Now Zack Snyder, no, Zack Snyder.
Zack Snyder. Not Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder is writing stories, also writing Undiscovered Country with Charles Soule, which is almost done. But anyway.
Zack Snyder, I mean, he's not a great director in the first place. But sorry, he's just not. But the problem is DC has never been a consistent. I think we have to be clear. Consistent doesn't mean quality; just means kind of similar. Everything kind of similar.
Like enough commonalities.
Commonalities, because like Superman and Batman, two different tones and just style. Superman is like happy-go-lucky, optimism, and Batman is dark and brooding. But I mean, he still wants to help people, so he's not but it's like gothic and and then Wonder Woman's kind of Greek mythology.
Yeah.
And then Green Lantern from what I hear is like space opera, kind of Star Wars-y a little bit. So it's like all these different things that seem so different, yet they all do exist in the same universe, and you get the Justice League. Yes. So that's going to be an interesting one as well, and I think that is what, so they are so just all over the place, but yet they are one franchise and have been for almost 80, 90 years.
I mean, when you think about coming back to Star Wars, right? You have Luke, who is the farm boy who becomes a Jedi. Leia is the senator princess, statesperson. Han's the scoundrel.
Yeah.
Those three are already very different, and they all represent different streams and different angles. At their best, they are able to come together and work together, but have their own unique kinds of stories. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe that's part of what's driving, what pushes all these things into franchises. Maybe it's what pushed Star Wars into a franchise period, is because you're immediately given these three characters in 1977. Not you or me, we weren't born yet, but we're given these three characters, and you gravitated towards one of them. You want to follow their story further. Now, Luke's story was the one that got the most purchase out of it. Purchase, pun maybe intended, but ultimately, especially with the EU, that's the thing with the EU, with paper, you had the opportunity to go beyond and to take the time. I keep saying this. Books give you the time and the space to explore different angles and different things. And so, I mean, there maybe even be different themes within those three characters. No wonder it expanded into a franchise. I mean, Kirk, Spock, McCoy. There's another trio, similar archetypes potentially. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, right? There's these trios, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor. So
I mean, they have their own movies for a reason.
They got their own movies, but they start with their own comic book runs. I mean, maybe these franchises are. I mean, that's maybe what I'm getting at ultimately, and I keep coming back to this. Baked into what a franchise is centrifugal and centripetal. Right? Is this tension between those two movements By that I just use some pretty big words. Sorry, guys. Um, the the movement out to diversify and the need to rein in and unify. Especially, I mean, that's the thing. Why Avengers was so exciting when they came together is okay. Here's all these different things we've liked in different ways. Now they're coming together and working together. Um, you know why Filoni's film is probably going to be so exciting, where they're probably moving towards this, right?
Right.
We all have different aspects of these shows. Why these moments in High Republic, like all these, they come together. Why the dedication of Starlight is so exciting. Why the fall of Starlight is so devastating. Why the Battle of Jeddah is so interesting is because we see it from all these different angles. Maybe the Battle of Dalna might be more difficult, depending. Some people love that. Some people love the way the Battle of Dalna is looked at in different angles from these different characters you connect with, but then you get a complete picture. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a question of, and it's different tones, and it gets back to what you're saying. These different tones, I mean, that's the thing. Andor, it's going to connect up with A New Hope. It's going to,
Mhm.
what if, what if Leia is in Andor? What if, who knows who is in Andor? Mon
Mon
Mothma's
Mothma's
in
in
both.
Andor. Mon
Mon
Mothma.
Mothma's in both these series, and
Yeah.
she has different
And a movie.
roles in both these series. So slightly different roles, but yeah, it's getting, and so one of the things maybe that excites us is when they. Here's the thing. I'm talking about, and this is being excited is a very subjective thing. We are excited by stories that relate to our particular situation. We're excited by stories that connect our situation with the wider whole.
Mhm.
We are maybe disappointed by stories that don't connect us to our situation. Not my Luke or who knows what. We are maybe bored by stories that are too predictable and too much the same. And so maybe it's the tricky thing of having to navigate uh and having to navigate, okay, when are these, the unity and diversity, is that exciting versus alienating and boring?
I
And
mean, I think that just boils down to is making these things is hard, and that's why we don't do it because we don't know. It's not like we can make $1 billion.
well, it boils down to um having a good story that appeals to people, right?
Well, no one know
And
what that is. Like, I don't know what appeals to people.
yeah, but I mean, there are the best storytellers do, and so maybe that's what you're getting at is,
I mean,
thankfully,
I think
you know,
we should never undercut that making all these films are hard, and I don't think
yes,
we can ever guarantee any of these will ever be
it's a
successful.
it's a challenge. It is the challenge, and especially a franchise challenge. I mean, that's maybe what the Delilah Dawson and then we're getting at in that panel at New York Comic Con. It's this challenge of inserting yourself into this wider galaxy and telling a unique story that is authentically Star Wars. And
And everyone got a
and
different
you
answer for
have,
that.
yeah, you have the, but again, I think the best Star Wars stories do that. The best post George Lucas Star Wars stories are able to do that. Charles Soule does that, Claudia Gray does that, Ryan Johnson does that.
I mean, I think that's
Delilah
all
Dawson does that.
true.
Yeah.
I mean, but also, I know plenty of people who don't like Charles Soule's work just as much as I know people who love it. I know people who don't
Yeah,
like,
sure.
and obviously, people don't like Last Jedi. It's
Because
like
it alienates them rather than connects with them.
true, and
Yeah.
I think in some ways it's disingenuous. In other ways, you know what, you never know
Yeah.
what's gonna hit.
True.
I guess I move on a little bit to the fan bubble thing. That's something I want to talk about a little bit
Yeah.
before we wrap up here.
Mhm.
We're
I
going
mean, we're
on.
kind of hitting. We're getting into
Yeah.
that. We're
Yeah,
kind of
but
moving into it.
it
Go
would have
for it.
been fascinating if, like, instead of episode 5, it's like, let's do a Leia spin-off and a Han spin-off early. It's like, if those would have been two different movies, just
Yeah.
in time. But that's a whole. But okay, so here's something that I think that we all need to always
Mhm.
be in the lookout for, and that
Be
is
aware of.
be
Yeah.
aware how much of our own I mean, I think this is something that just in general, how much of it is our own biases, and how much are we in our fan bubble
Mhm.
and making decisions and opinions based off this fan bubble. And to me, the fan bubble is social media, our discords, our fan communities, even there. Excuse me. Even dare I say our conventions. Um,
Which is our YouTube podcasts.
our YouTube podcasts, our Twitter accounts, our Twitches. You
Yep.
know, I have this like weird analogy where we compare the convention to the church. It's like, okay, I can get a
Yep.
thousand people in a church. Does that really mean Christianity's on the rise and people are loving it? I don't know. Or just like I got lucky and I got a thousand people in a church.
It does not. I can tell
Yeah,
you, it does not.
exactly, exactly. And I think sometimes I kind of question. I think we as fans overestimate our own power
Hmm,
and decisions being made when in reality that's just not true. Like,
interesting.
I'm more willing to buy they paused Star Wars movies more because of what happened with Solo and the messy production of Rise of Skywalker than anything to do with Last Jedi, to be quite
Sure.
honest. I don't
Interesting.
even believe J.J. Abrams went on Reddit and like, what do people hate about Rise of Skywalker? I will put it in the movie. I just think J.J. Abrams just
Okay,
isn't a
lost
great
it.
storyteller and just doesn't execute his movies well.
Yeah.
I don't think he cares about what the Twitter, YouTube, Reddit thing is. He's a rich Hollywood producer. Why does he care? He's kicking it up with the Bob Iger, the Kathleen Kennedys of the world,
Yeah.
like in his mansion or his big house in L.A. Why does he care about what random YouTuber says of not my Luke? I don't think he really does. I just
Hmm,
think he's just not that great a storyteller. So then he is that.
yeah. Unless he felt not my Luke himself.
I don't think he's that analogous to that. I don't think he cares
I
that
don't.
much.
I don't know either. You're right, but
I mean, it's like
yeah.
and that is at the same time, it's like, is John Favreau and Dave Filoni not my Luke because they decided, what, we're gonna put Luke Skywalker and have him
No,
kick butt? No.
that's an amazing response to it. Right. Actually, it's
Yeah, I
and
mean,
again, go back to Din. Din's initial response to that scene was actually that is still my Luke. It's just in a different time.
right. And but some people did criticize it, thinking, Last Jedi comes out and then
I
20
did. That
years
was my
later.
initial feeling. I thought it was repudiating that moment. And then I had to think more deeply about it. Right.
Right, and I don't know what Dave Filoni thinks about the sequel trilogy per se. I don't think he probably. I think there are things he likes and things he doesn't. I think there
Mhm.
are always going to be
Yeah.
things where he goes, "Well, I wouldn't have done that,"
Right.
but but that is his thing, and like, um, but at the
Yeah.
same time, and again, that's sort of like we have to kind of keep in mind that our
Yeah.
Twitter bubble is not as powerful as we think it is, or even how popular or even how hated things were. Do I
Sure.
think the prequels were as hated as they were because of the online thing? No, I still don't think they are as loved as they probably would be either. I think it's sort of a
Mm,
weird in the middle area. Same with Last Jedi. I actually don't think Last Jedi is that super hated. And that only like cause like
mm.
do you ever go out in the real world and people going Last Jedi? Like no.
You're more likely to find people who are the prequels, though.
Probably, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's somewhat telling in a little bit of an interesting way.
Yeah.
Um, or
Mhm.
even the popularity side, High
Yeah.
Republic. High Republic's big in the Twitter fan sphere. How big is it outside of that? Like streaming
Yeah.
show coming up. Not really marketing on the fact it's High Republic. I mean, maybe in the
It's
summary,
marketing it to us.
yeah. But
But
at the
not to
same,
anyone.
but it's
Yeah.
like the title is called the thing. It's not. There's
Yeah.
no High Republic in that title.
Yeah.
And obviously we'll see when the marketing really ramps up. Hopefully in next year.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and this week, me and Buddy Trey, we had a friendly debate, and we kind of came to the same conclusion at the end of the day. It's like
Hmm.
something based you said of the reason Thrawn came back is because he's such a beloved character, and I'm like, I'm not 100% sure Thrawn came back because he was a beloved character from the books.
Hmm.
And so then I kind of moderated where it's like maybe Thrawn would have come back because he is to a certain extent a beloved character, but I think that is to take away the fact that he's coming back in the way he's coming back. because Dave Filoni is that unique Star Wars person of he's the fan who made it and has a
Yeah.
lot of pull at Lucasfilm and is now making live action
He's
cinema and
beloved to
want
Dave Filoni. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
Dave Filoni's like, I'm gonna pick you up, Thrawn, because I just like you, and I'm gonna put you in my show.
Mhm.
And even to the numbers, whatever those mean, if you kind of believe the general idea of what was big and what's kind of,
Mhm.
I don't want to say floundering, but average, or what's actually the norm. The norm is Andor and Ahsoka, and the above expectations is Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett, because those things are from the movies. And then Mandalorian is like the thing that
Yeah.
no one really expected because of Grogu. So that's kind of more the
Yeah.
odd man out. But like Andor and Ahsoka are, from numbers wise, kind of average, because that's what the norm is, because they're not uber popular legacy characters the same way Kenobi or Boba Fett was,
Right.
who had 3 movies, well, more than 3 movies with Kenobi and more than 3 movies with Boba, to kind of like, oh, okay, I'm going to watch this.
I want to caution. I mean, this is how my brain goes against any kind of either or on this. What you're getting at is what's the influence and how much at Lucasfilm and at Disney. What's the influence of the celebration going, Star Wars celebration going fan base? I can put it that way. Those who would go to celebration would love to go to celebration. Those folks. Um, I'll use the analogy here is in the soccer world, at least in North America, there's people who go to games, maybe watch TV. It's not the most popular sport. Maybe for people that's like, oh yeah, live sports in town. Why not? A growing, interesting thing, global thing. It's big in Europe, big in the rest of the world. Um, so I'm curious. I'll check it out. There is that general fan base that does actually, it is more profitable now. It was a lot less. It is more now. Um, but then there's those of us who join these supporters groups, and we we stand at one end of the end of the field and are for the whole 90 minutes chanting and clapping and yelling at the ref and all that and beating the drums and whatnot, driving the energy in the stadium. And and so it's we don't pay as much for tickets. We don't, we'll buy the merch, we'll be there, but just yeah, we don't have that. But we're the minority for sure. Um, there's some people there 2 tickets in their seat close up to the on the side are equivalents of my whole season tickets. We create the energy in the stadium. We create the energy throughout the rest of the fans. I hope Lucasfilm understands that we have the ability and the potential. You know, people at work seeing this backdrop when I'm on a work call, which they do. They see this. This is what I work from this computer, and you see that. They're like, "Oh yeah, there's a Star Wars out," reminding them that there's a Star Wars out. People who care about these things, they still want to appeal to us. They still want us to be invested and connected and involved. Um, they still want to be able to rely on us for those numbers, for those financial numbers, for the viewership numbers, for the energy throughout the rest of society. And so it isn't this all or nothing. They do want to write stories and tell stories that do have a wider appeal, that don't necessarily require you to have gone back and watched 7 seasons of an animated show in order to really get what's going on. But they also know that if they give a show for those who have gone back, who have watched those 7 seasons and watched them starting in 2008, it's going to have this deeper love for what they're doing now that has its own impetus and has its uh, own energy to it. I'm not speaking maybe brass financials, but there is. I mean, that's kind of my point with The Last Jedi, in that it did have an impact, in that it created negative energy, negative feels throughout some, the sense of the fandom. And so that does translate into residually. People may not even know why there's this divisiveness about it. That does translate into, oh, this is a divisive show. We're not necessarily going to like it as much or not. Is that I think, the question is, High Republic really that popular? That's another thing, is popularity and belovedness. That's all relative. Um, and it's relative to how important is this energy in our end of the stadium here, uh, as it translates into the rest of, the rest of society. There's a reason they keep doing Celebration, right? There's a reason they keep doing it. The reason they're going to Japan. Um, Otherwise, why bother, right? And
I
so,
would right.
and to
I
say, my point being, um, it matters enough that they're keeping doing it, um, because of the hope that that will ripple out maybe into the rest of society. Here's the question though:
Mhm.
is no, most general audience doesn't care about lore, but I think they still do care about the things I was talking about before, namely fun action adventure and deeper meaningful themes and ideas, right? I do want to give some give a good chunk of our society a bit more credit, that they're able to be a little bit more literate and understanding, especially if they primarily say watch historical fiction or drama or comedy, the deep informed, interesting comedy. They are also able.
Oh, hello. Oh no, you're muted. Oh no, are you back?
Yeah,
Hello. There we go.
we're back. Yeah, I think we're back. Yeah, this connection is bad. Are they
Yeah,
still able to appreciate a Star War that tackles themes and ideas? Um,
I can.
I
Yeah, I
think
think
so, maybe.
so.
You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, it's, yeah, I get your point that, the certainly the divisiveness of it, again, even including with The Last Jedi, is probably it's outsized. We don't need to get into all a panic or a huff. Um, I think there is something Lucasfilm does notice, the fact that, uh, whenever there's been a High Republic panel at Celebration, it's packed the room out, and that, that isn't a non-zero. That is a financial gain for them, given, it's a lot cheaper to make a book than a movie, so there's probably a net gain there too for a book franchise, for book publishing. I mean, High Republic novels have got to be at the top, in terms of the new canon, at least, in terms of popularity, because here's the thing: it has a connected franchise title to it,
Oh
a
yeah.
franchise within the franchise, namely High Republic. And so, I mean, that's the thing. So, E.K. Johnson, she talks about how her independent novels are, they sell okay, but I mean, Ahsoka probably outsold everything she had written before that, right?
Oh
Combined.
yeah. I mean, we live in an IP world. That's just the set, kind of the somewhat sad truth. And if you want
You
to
know,
like get into
and
like
so,
big
but
artistry.
that is important to know, okay, that, the franchise, and therefore the ardent fans of the franchise, helping to drive the wider popularity of it. I think it's both end. It's both end.
I so I'll I'll guess I'll respond to a couple ways. So I actually do agree with you with the positivity celebration stuff,
Mhm.
but only because that's so physical. Like you have to like you can't ignore
Yeah,
the people in celebration going to a big convention. That's like impossible.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't think the divisiveness is honestly that important because
mm,
like I kind of wonder like how many people know that people are just constantly complaining about Last Jedi every day and gay on Twitter. Like the majority of the world does not care.
and we've moved on from that.
And we moved on, and I think
And
most
there's bigger in the world at large. There are way bigger fish to fry.
that too,
You
but
know.
but even like the whole Star Wars is dead, Marvel fatigue,
Yeah,
those discourses for me do not really matter
yeah,
because like if you have Marvel, like I think Marvel fatigue might exist to a certain extent because yeah, this franchise has been around for 20 years at this point. You're gonna
Mhm.
get tired eventually, but I think if you have like true fatigue, then what
Mhm.
are you doing with your life, buddy? It's like, okay, I get tired, but then it's like, hey, look, a cool Marvel film. I'm gonna go see it. I'm gonna see this next Marvel film.
Yeah,
Awesome. And then I'm excited again. Hooray.
hopefully. I
You know,
mean, I think some people are like aren't able to necessarily appreciate the differences, but
yeah, and I just and also just like, are you spending each and every day focusing on the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Like, don't you got other stuff to do?
yeah.
I love Star Wars, but like I try to like get a walk and stuff like that. Um,
Mhm.
and then in terms of like the High Republic stuff, I mean, yes, I agree. I just think if you came to me and said
Mhm.
High Republic movie, $1 billion tomorrow, easy win, I'd be like, is
I don't know
it
if
a
I'd say that.
$1 billion movie?
I
I
wouldn't
don't
say that.
know.
I don't
I
think
mean,
that's
I know you didn't say that, but it's like if
yeah,
someone would say
yeah,
that to me, if you or someone would say that to me, I'm like, it's like when people say "Old Republic," easy money, $1 billion. I'm like, you realize that most people don't really know what the Old Republic is. It's like when people are like, you don't have
mhm,
to market it; it'll just make money on its own. It's
yeah,
like, no, you have to market this, and I think just
yeah.
plastering Old Republic everywhere was going to be going.
Like, are people saying that? Are people saying it's a slam dunk there? I don't
I
know.
see people see that every
Just
now
me,
and then
okay.
of like, make an Old Republic movie, $1 billion, easy.
I think the
Um,
Filoni movie and the Ray movie are more likely to be. I mean, that's the thing is the biblical epic. That's going to be the bigger swing, which is why I'm here for it.
oh
But
yeah. And I'm not even saying
yeah,
don't do big swings. I'm just saying
mhm,
I also would just say uh, just in terms of like money, like
mhm.
Force Awakens being $1 billion was like kind of a whoa moment. Like I don't think anyone really expected. They thought like 400
Really,
million, $700 million at best, and then it kind of really exploded.
hmm,
I think the films coming up are also
mhm.
kind of like average 400 million, $700 million movies. Hopefully they keep those budgets in check so that they're not losing money.
Yeah,
But that's a whole other discussion. But again, it's like again, if you think Old Republic is or High Republic is like an easy $1 billion movie, you gotta work to that. I think High
yeah,
Republic is working to that. I think the books help that. I think they give it a nice base of support. Then you kind of elevate it, and then you elevate
mhm,
it again. Um, so that's kind of where I think fan bubbles in the
yeah,
extreme happen. But I do agree with you on uh
yeah,
yeah. But I think and kind of to get to I kind of put and it's kind of where I think the fan side of thing and the book side of thing is sort of intertwined a little bit.
yeah,
'Cause I think in a lot of ways, books. I don't. I'm sure every Star Wars is someone's first Star Wars to some extent, but I
yeah.
do think the books and comics are made for people already deep dive. They're
Yes,
already in it.
I agree.
Video games are like the only kind of weird exception to this rule.
Yeah,
But again, it's sort of like again, it's like when people say, just make Thrawn the villain in episode 7 and everyone's gonna love it. Like, again, Thrawn might be a beloved book character, and
mhm,
but is he $1 billion franchise movie? And this is still a business at the end of the day. Um
yeah. No, I agree with that, and it's interesting. We'll see. They are making again a series that is going to be more tied in with books.
mhm.
It's still going to be the first. People are probably still going to be like, "Oh, who's this Vernestra Rowe person? Let's
Oh
go
yeah.
read her books before by Justina Ireland." Um, but that's still going to be their first interaction with High Republic, even if the phrase High Republic probably not even going to show up in it because it's set in the actual era, unless it's in a crawl or something. But
I hope they don't say High Republic here. I mean, I know it's weird to say, but like that just to me is one of those weird things. Like,
they'd
don't,
have to use a framing device,
yeah,
like
don't.
with Yoda and Tales of the Jedi, right?
Right.
But I don't know if they will. Yeah, it
It'd
doesn't
be
make
so
sense.
weird.
It makes sense to say High Republic in Dooku Jedi Lost,
Hmm.
or like what era are we in right now? Are we in the late modern era? Are we in the I don't know the IT era? I don't know. What era are we?
Yo,
Let's just go.
Yoda at the beginning of that, like, it's good. Another good day in the High Republic.
Yeah.
Good day in High Republic it is.
There's
Yes. No,
no
don't.
such thing as a golden age, and that's another thing.
All right.
This is a stray thought. You can't call this a high republic. There's no such thing as an actual golden age. We know things were maybe better at some aspect of it way back when. That's an interesting thing with John Jackson Miller with Living Force. There are going to be characters, Masters of the Council, who look back on the High Republic and think, "Oh, that was such a great time, such a golden age." That's the whole thing. Filling a church with 1,000 people. What doesn't mean it's actually having the impact in the world it needs to have. Anyway.
Right. I mean, yeah, and Star Wars, I think some of us don't kind of want to admit it. Star Wars has not been the big thing
No.
since, honestly, after Return of the Jedi, and I only say that, well, Phantom Menace was kind of the last big time. But here's the thing: keep in mind,
Yeah.
when the original trilogy was coming out, it was just Star Wars was it. That was like the thing of like family for
Yeah.
kids, that action packed scenes to
Mhm.
do. Nowadays, it's like when the prequels were coming out, you also had Lord of the Rings, Harry
Yeah.
Potter, the Pirates film, Matrix, Raimi's Spider Man, some of those early Marvel films that were gonna the prelude to the MCU.
Mhm.
Today we have MCU, MonsterVerse, DC films that hopefully will get better. Other things, anime, independent cartoons,
Mhm.
all that good stuff, and
You just
uh,
go to any major con, and that's the thing about cons also. First
yeah,
of all, they are at more in the cultural center, but that's maybe a similar question as with franchises, also cons. There's so many different things for everybody. Can you even say you went to the same con, right? Like you were all
mhm,
spent all your time in the anime section, spent all your time with the cosplay, or with the Star Wars cosplay, or with the whoever cosplay. Yeah, it's or just mining for comics, or
mhm.
whatever. It's actually. I'm not saying it's. I think it's fantastic. I think it's wonderful. It's just that maybe we need to actually find a way of. We need to make sure we're embracing diversity and hospitality in all that as well. Yeah.
Right. And I guess to kind of wrap this all up, because we've been going for a while,
Yeah.
I think, looking at books, comics, High Republic, things to come, I think the
Yeah.
key word here is growth. I don't
Mhm.
know, like, whether that means sticking to Lucas's themes or the consistency. That's something to be interested in to look at later. But I think it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we did our Luke Con Leia thing. We did that. That's done. Now it's kind of time to grow. So it's like when they talk about the numbers for the Withered Show and Andor not being great or whatever. I think that's all kind of a discourse in itself.
Mhm.
Well, they're not legacy characters, so let's see what their season twos bring, and will they get more audience? Or not, it's
I
probably
mean,
that.
one is becoming a legacy character for sure because
I mean, I
she's
think.
so tied into the Skywalker saga.
Oh, I mean, I think yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I would hope, but well, more people are knowing about the Withered and the Blue Guy more and more, and hopefully as the years go on, and
Come on, come on,
I don't
strike.
know.
Just end
And,
already.
more and people kinda know who
Get a good
Andor
deal.
is, and I think as
Yeah.
the show keeps going and going, people talk about that more,
I
more
mean,
people catch
Andor did a
season
great
2.
job that last moment of that season, having the big explodey star thing,
Oh, yeah.
connecting to the saga,
And,
connecting to the franchise.
with High Republic, that's kind of
Mm.
an interesting look at growth where it's like, okay, we're gonna start
Mhm.
more on the book side of things, so maybe not gonna be the cultural phenomenon
Mhm.
that sweeps the world, but definitely in the Star Wars world, it's like, okay, more book fans are liking it. Then we're
Mhm.
gonna hopefully have the streaming show in next year, which is like, okay, we're gonna
Mhm.
branch out. We're gonna branch out and see if it get some adequate numbers and kind of grows over time.
Mhm.
And then, if it gets bigger and bigger, then let's greenlight a movie, and then you can kind of say, okay, it's got
Mhm.
enough legs to like justify movie money.
Yeah.
Kind of what they're doing with Mandalorian, but with books, kind of going even further back.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah.
And then, I hope that Ray's film is not just one Ray film, and then we're never doing anything. Like,
Yeah.
let's see how well it goes, and then grow it. Like, keep telling more
Mhm.
Ray adventures of her students and her fun. Grow it
Yeah.
out, and then grow those audiences, grow those fans to bring in new people.
Mhm.
Grow those new characters even. So I think growth is the name of the game. And
Yeah.
you can if you and the I think they would be foolish, and this is kind of the one's wrong takeaway from Solo for sure, is if just because your film doesn't hit $1 billion doesn't mean just cut everything out and it's like, okay, you didn't hit 1 billion. No one expects you to hit a billion. You can't start with Endgame money. You gotta
Yeah.
build. It took Marvel forever to get to Endgame money. You know, took 3 phases, so you gotta build up to that Endgame money.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean that's just it, and that's a fantastic point, especially because it gets at the absolute numbers. Financial numbers aren't the most important thing. It's what movement, what direction is it moving in? What direction is something moving in terms of the different pockets of the Star Wars franchise. That's the thing with High Republic. It gradually picked up steam and it keeps going and going and going. It'll be interesting to see if spreading the books out. I think that'll actually pick up even more steam because more people will have time to get into it and catch up. It's going to have growth. Um, with the streaming series, they started out big, but I think they've just expanded and grown outward into different kinds of stories. Hopefully, more people have enjoyed them. More people have connected with them. Yeah, and maybe at their best, what the business people get is they aren't saying like you're saying, and maybe you're kind of just reiterating your point, but maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the solution. At least for our hope is that the business people aren't saying, well, this is making X number of dollars, so we're only going to care about that versus this making this number of dollars. It's I mean, smart business people are saying, well, this made this much more percentage over last year. That's interesting. Let's keep an eye on that. For whereas, and why did it make more? Oh, it's an interesting, compelling story that connects culturally with people on the ground. Okay, let's do that then. You know, um, that's the thing with High Republic. Why it's had such an impact that it has is because it's connected with people on the ground, and that does again translate into book sales, which aren't film sales, but you can notice over time, you know, January 2021 to you um to November, December 2023, January 2024, the growth in book sales, how many New York Times bestsellers? And it has something. High Republic has had more New York Times bestsellers than any other canon Star Wars book. So uh yeah, there's something for whatever that number is worth. Hopefully they pay attention to the relative market share and to see,
Right.
okay, there's something compelling about those.
I mean, I'll use books as an example just to keep our paper canon integrity in
Yeah.
check. Let's like the stupid decision would be okay. Light in
Mm.
Life only sells 500,000 copies. You know,
Like
let's
the
just make up.
young
I'm
adult
making up a
anthology.
number. I'm
Yeah.
making up a number. But
Yeah.
the executive publishing are like didn't sell a million copies. High Republic canceled. Forget it.
Yeah.
Nah, we're over. Didn't make a million the first try. We're
Mhm.
done. We're wrapping up here. Instead of like, okay, the first one made 500,000. The next book makes 600,000. Then maybe the next one maybe
Yeah.
it makes a little dip. Maybe you get a little dip. Not everything's equally growth. And then get the final phase. And then it's like, oh, there we go, 1 million copies. Woohoo, we made it.
That's what I'm getting at, right? They'll
Right.
notice that. It's not going to be anywhere near the numbers of Disney Plus subscriptions or box office sales, but it's something at all
I
to
mean,
notice.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the same logic you use for the Disney Plus stuff. Like, okay, or let's just make up a number. We're making up numbers here.
Sure.
Like, okay, like Kenobi made 1 million views because it's Kenobi. So it's like, okay, yeah, Kenobi easy win. But Andor, it gets like 500,000 views, or maybe
Yeah.
400,000. Let's make it even lower. Do you like, okay, Tony, to you right? You didn't make 1 million views. You're done. Get out of
Right.
here. Go away, Tony. We don't want your season 2. Or do you like, okay, make your season 2, or gets lots of buzz because it's good and people like it. I
Mhm.
mean, quality does help to a certain extent.
You think?
I mean, it does help. Yeah, I'm not gonna say everything that makes a millions of dollars is always quality. I'm looking at you, Transformers films, but if you're growing, so like when season 2 comes along, maybe season 2, like there's enough like goodwill for Andor that's like
Yeah.
that's when it gets its million views. Like the first, like it goes
Yeah.
up in viewership. You'd hope. I mean, streaming's all weird and wonky for a certain extent, but it's like you want the growth. You want more people to be watching, and that's the same for every show. Star Trek, like Star Trek DNG. Star Trek DNG was not the phenomenon that started it. It was hated. It had problems.
Right.
it was all over the place. And then season 6,
It,
season 7, it's the biggest show of the 90s.
I mean, yeah. I mean, even to season 3 and 4
Oh
already.
yeah, I'm talking, of course.
Yeah,
By the time you
but
got, by the
yeah,
time
I
you
see what you
what?
mean there. Yeah, so maybe again, and just to wrap, put a bow on all this, right? It the answer is relative growth, relative weight, relative market share. People are hopefully the executives there are smarter than we sometimes give them credit for, except for give the actors a good deal. Come on, you know
Of
what you're doing.
course,
You know what
give
you're
them a
doing.
good deal and enough
There we
with
go.
this AI nonsense.
There.
But with that, I think we've done it.
Yeah.
I think we covered as much as we can in 2 hours. There's always probably more to cover, but
Yeah.
we did a good job.
There you go.
I'm happy.
Yeah, that's interesting. We actually started off naming a problem. We finally got into seeing, understanding. Okay, how do we understand this better? That's what the deep dive is all about. The Iron Cannon deep dive. Yeah. So thanks everyone for sticking it out with us, for watching now or later. Let us know in the comments. What do you think makes a good franchise? What do you think makes a good Star Wars story? Um,
Does Star Wars
does it
need, what do you call it? Not consist. Well,
does it need to have coherence? What coherence would that be? Or it can just be whatever the heck it wants, author wants, and just slap a Star Wars label on it. I'm asking this a very leading question way, but if you can make a case to say it can just be whatever, and you can actually, tell the story that kind of upends the moral fabric of it, and that counts as Star Wars. I'm sure some people want that. Great Jedi.
yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't
I
help
think
it.
they're doing something here, and I'm like, no, thank you, no, thank you.
But there are creatives in there. Should they be free to actually explore those kinds of things? Can they, in a way that's authentic to whatever Star Wars happens to be? um and will it sell? Will it sell merch? Will it sell books? Will it sell comic books? Will it sell toys? Action figures? Will it sell at the box office? Let us know. Give us your thoughts. Open questions. This franchise is going to keep going, even unless there's a massive just collapse of the industry, which come on, they shouldn't let it get that far unless Bob Iger has completely failed at his job, which he won't do, as we've discovered, as we've established. I don't think he's going to hopefully let it go that far. But that's the thing. One last point there, because it's gone on so long, we're just, when is this actually going to end, and when is their breaking point? We don't know. We hope there is a breaking point for the studios, the production companies eventually. On that note, let us know what you thought. You can comment bubbles are down below. Comment boxes are down below on Underworld YouTube, Underworld Facebook, Underworld Twitch, Iron Cannon Twitch, Underworld Twitter, Iron Cannon Twitter. Let us know, comments below. Yeah, give us a like and a follow on this channel if you haven't subscribed to the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. Give us a sub. Definitely appreciate. Definitely supports the channel. Means you can get every episode of Iron Cannon every Monday night, and every episode of Tractor Beam Thursday afternoons. Right here on all these socials, on these channels, right here. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, even though I'm pretty quiet from the internet, I try to stay out of my fan bubble. I kid. You can always find me at JID2021, again, JID2021 on Twitter. You can follow me at the Ion Cannon Pod, Ion Cannon Pod on Twitter. And of course, you can mostly find me at the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Join us Friday night. We're gonna play some Fortnite. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Let's be there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and on the Discord, those events, fun events, and also just text chatting in the Discord. Joel, you're there all the time. Here's a guarantee. I know, Joel, I know you well enough, so I'm gonna guarantee with people, if you chime in and you tag Joel in the Discord, he will answer you. He'll get back to you.
I will.
Even if you don't tag him, he will answer. He'll get back to you. There we go. Very active, very well. Both Joel and Ben doing such a great job keeping this up, keeping this going, being present and active in that space. You can find me on Instagram and Threads, MNEUG1138. Again, not really using Threads much, but it's there on Instagram, especially Twitter, NEUG485. Yeah, you're gonna got photos of my walk in High Park in Toronto. If you want to look those up, all my photos of New York Comic Con, MEUG 1138 on Instagram. Of course, at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANON POD. course, the flagship and the whole network, at the SWU. Great to, the fandom fam. We're going strong, especially in the Discord. So check us out there. Next week, I think I got the plugs out of the way. Yeah. Next week we do have an idea. We're kind of going back into in-universe survey. This was very much an out-of-universe discussion. We're talking about going back in universe, very much relevant to the opening of the High Republic Phase 3. Key moments in the Jedi Republic relationship that we've talked about a lot. Just how the Jedi and the Republic relate to each other, have related to each other throughout the in-universe history. How should they relate to each other is an important question. It also has real-world implications that I happen to care about a lot too. So, and Joel, I think you do too. So,
I'm excited.
definitely join us for that discussion. Same bat time, same Catacoot time. There's a good High Republic reference, deep dive. Same Catacoot time, same Catacoot channel. The Catacoot, of course, in High Republic Phase 2. There we go. Yeah, right here, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, Mondays, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, let's blow this thing and head home.